Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. It's Christmas Eve, 1873. You're standing in a farmhouse somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. The sun dropped below the horizon 2 hours ago, and now the darkness isn't just outside your windows. It's pressing against them, thick and alive like something with weight. There's no streetlight glow bleeding through your curtains. No porch light your neighbor forgot to turn off. No headlights sweeping across your walls as cars pass by. Nothing. The kind of darkness that makes you understand why every culture on Earth invented monsters to live in it. You light a single candle, and that flickering flame becomes your entire universe. Everything beyond its weak circle of light just vanishes into absolute black. Your kids are huddled around that candle like it's a campfire, their faces half illuminated, their eyes showing just a tiny bit of that primal fear we've spent 10,000 years trying to forget. And here's the thing that'll blow your mind. This wasn't some rare emergency situation. This wasn't a power outage people complained about. This was just Tuesday. This was every single night. This was Christmas. Tonight, we're going back to a world that's almost impossible for us to imagine now. A world where the sun's setting wasn't just a pretty transition from day to night. It was the moment when civilization basically turned off. When you became trapped in your own home by darkness so complete that walking from your bedroom to your kitchen could genuinely be dangerous. When Christmas wasn't twinkling lights and late-night shopping and movies playing until dawn, it was survival. It was family pressed together for warmth and safety. It was stories told in the dark because there was literally nothing else to do. And if you think you can imagine what that was like, trust me, you can't. None of us can, because darkness today, even when we turn off all our lights, isn't real darkness. There's always light pollution from somewhere, always some electronic device glowing, always some ambient light finding its way in. But back then, darkness was something else entirely. The winter of 1876. We're talking about a time that's not even that long ago, right? Your great-great-grandparents were alive, photography existed, trains were crisscrossing the country. America was becoming, well, America. But here's what's wild. When the sun went down in December, which happened around 4:30 in the afternoon, people basically traveled back in time about 10,000 years. Everything we associate with being human, with being civilized, with being advanced, just stopped. Let me paint you a picture of the Peterson family. They're not real, but they're also completely real because they're based on hundreds of diary entries, letters, and historical records from people who lived through this. Thomas Peterson is a farmer. His wife Margaret manages the household. They've got 4 kids ranging from 6 to 15. They live in upstate New York, about 20 miles from the nearest town. Their farmhouse is decent sized by the standards of the day. 4 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs. Sounds pretty good, right? It's December 23rd, 1876. The entire family has been working since before dawn because that's what you did. Not because some boss demanded it, but because if you didn't work during daylight hours, you literally couldn't work at all. There were no night shifts, no working late, no staying up to finish that one last thing. When the sun set, work stopped. Period. Around 3 in the afternoon, Margaret starts getting anxious. She's checking the windows, looking at the sky. The kids pick up on it. Thomas comes in from the barn, stamping snow off his boots. And everyone starts this ritual that's so ingrained they don't even think about it anymore. They're preparing for darkness like soldiers preparing for battle. First, they bring all the water they might need for the night, and I mean all of it. Water for drinking, for cooking breakfast, for washing, for everything. Because once it gets dark, you're not going outside to the well. You could trip and break your ankle. You could get lost, and yeah, you could get lost in your own yard when it's that dark. You could freeze to death 20 feet from your own door. It happened, more often than you'd think. They bring in enough firewood to last through the night. And we're not talking about a cute little fireplace fire like you might have going while you watch Netflix. We're talking about serious wood, armloads of it, because the fireplace isn't ambience. It's the only thing standing between your family and literal death by freezing. Houses back then weren't insulated like ours. Heat escaped through every crack, every gap in the floorboards, every window. The temperature inside your house at night was maybe 20 degrees warmer than outside. Maybe. Margaret checks the candles and the oil for the lamps. They've got to ration this stuff carefully because it's expensive. A single candle might cost the equivalent of $5 in today's money. A gallon of lamp oil, even more, so you don't just light up your whole house. You light 1 candle, maybe 2 if it's a special occasion. Christmas Eve qualifies as special, so they might splurge on 3 candles. 3 tiny flames to hold back the dark for an entire family in a 4-room house. The sun sets at 4:27 p.m. Thomas knows because he's been watching it. He's learned to read the sky the way we read clocks. When that last sliver of sun disappears below the horizon, everything changes, and I mean everything. The temperature inside the house immediately starts dropping, not over hours, over minutes. Within 30 minutes of sunset, it's cold enough to see your breath in the rooms farthest from the fireplace. The kids instinctively move closer together, closer to the fire, closer to each other. Something ancient in their brains is screaming at them that safety is in the group, in the warmth, in the light. Margaret lights the first candle. That moment, that tiny flare of light, is significant in a way we just can't understand anymore, because that little flame isn't just light. It's hope, it's civilization. It's proof that humans can push back against the dark, even if just by inches. The kids watch the candle light up like it's magic, even though they've seen it thousands of times before, because every single time there's that split second where the match might not catch, where the wick might not light, where they might be left in absolute darkness. Thomas positions that first candle in the main room, the room where they'll spend the next 14 hours. 14 hours, let that sink in. From 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m., this family will be essentially trapped in one room of their house. Venturing into the other rooms is possible, but it means carrying a candle or stumbling through darkness. And with houses made of wood, with clothing made of wool and cotton, with everything around you desperately flammable, carrying open flames around wasn't something you did casually. The family eats dinner around 5 p.m. Margaret prepared everything before the sun set because cooking in the dark is somewhere between extremely difficult and genuinely dangerous. They eat by candlelight, and it's not romantic, it's frustrating. You can't see your food properly. The kids spill things, everything takes longer. But nobody complains because complaining doesn't make the sun come back. After dinner, here's where it gets really interesting, because now they've got about 12 hours to fill before it's time to sleep. 12 hours of darkness. No TV, obviously, no radio, no phones, no computers, no tablets, no books really, because reading by candlelight is hard on the eyes and wastes expensive candle wax. So what do? They talk, they tell stories. The kids play quiet games. Margaret might do some mending if she sits right next to the candle. Thomas might whittle something. But mostly, they just sit together in that tiny circle of light and exist as a family in a way that we've completely forgotten how to do. And here's something that'll mess with your head. They're not bored. Boredom, the way we experience it, doesn't really exist for them because they don't know anything else. They've never experienced anything different. They've never stayed up until 2 a.m. binge-watching a series. They've never scrolled through their phone for hours. They've never had the option to just turn on more lights and read a book or do a craft project or anything. This is just what night is. It's dark, you're together, you wait for morning. But Christmas is different. Christmas has always been different, even before electricity. Maybe especially before electricity. Around 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, something shifts in the Peterson household. Thomas gets up and brings out something special that he's been hiding. A small bag of candy, not a lot, maybe enough for each kid to have 3 pieces. In today's terms, we're talking about maybe $5 worth of candy. But to these kids, it might as well be treasure, because sugar is expensive and rare and special, because treats aren't something you get every day or even every week, because scarcity makes things precious in a way abundance never can. Margaret starts telling the Christmas story, not reading it from a book because it's too dark for that, but reciting it from memory. And everyone's heard it before, obviously, many times, but there's something about hearing it in the dark, by candlelight, with your family pressed close together for warmth, that makes it different, makes it matter in a visceral way. The oldest daughter, Emma, starts singing Silent Night. Her voice is thin and wavering because she's nervous and the cold makes it hard to sing, but everyone joins in, and I want you to really think about this for a second. You're in near total darkness. You're cold. You're in a tiny circle of light that represents the only safety and warmth in miles, and you're singing about holy night and peace and the hope of salvation. That song hits different when the night genuinely feels like something you need to be saved from. Around 9 p.m., something happens that shows you just how different this world is. One of the candles starts guttering. It's running out of wax, and Margaret has to make a decision. Does she light another candle, eating into their precious supply, or do they make do with less light? She decides to let it burn out and not replace it. They'll conserve the resources. When that candle goes out, the darkness surges in. That's the only way to describe it. It doesn't gradually get darker. The darkness rushes into the space that light held, and suddenly the room feels smaller. The shadows are deeper. The things at the edge of vision are harder to see. The kids unconsciously move even closer to the remaining candle. And there's this sound that you never really think about, the sound of a house at night. In our world, there's always ambient noise, the hum of the refrigerator, the heating system clicking on and off, traffic in the distance, planes overhead, electronic devices doing their thing, white noise we don't even register anymore. But in the Peterson house, there's nothing, just the crackle of the fire, the whisper of breath, the creak of the house settling. And outside, if you listen carefully, the absolute silence of snow falling. That silence is its own kind of presence. It's so complete that it's almost loud. Your ears strain to hear something, anything, and find nothing. And in that nothing, your imagination starts to fill in the gaps. Was that a sound outside? Is something moving in the dark corners of the room? Are there eyes looking in through the windows, hidden by the darkness outside? Thomas tells a story about when he was a boy, about a Christmas when the snow was so deep they couldn't get to town for 3 weeks, about how they ran out of flour and his mother made bread out of ground corn and wishful thinking, about how they tied a rope from the house to the barn so they could feed the animals without getting lost in the blizzard. The kids listen with wide eyes because this isn't ancient history to them. This is last winter. This is what could happen again tomorrow. Now here's something fascinating. Despite the darkness, despite the cold, despite the isolation, there's something deeply peaceful about this Christmas Eve. Not peaceful in the way we use the word, meaning quiet and relaxing, but peaceful in an older sense. The sense of being exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, with the people you're supposed to be with. These folks aren't anxious about missing out on something better. They're not worried about whether they bought the right gifts or decorated enough or sent out cards to everyone. They're not comparing their Christmas to anyone else's Instagram perfect holiday. They're just here, together, in the dark, and that's enough. Around 10 p.m, Margaret starts settling the younger kids down for sleep. And here's another thing that'll blow your mind. The kids sleep in the same room as their parents, all of them, because the upstairs rooms, the bedrooms, are absolutely freezing. We're talking below freezing temperatures. Your water glass would have ice in it by morning. Your breath would frost on the blankets. So everyone sleeps in the main room near the fire, bundled together for warmth. They don't change into pajamas the way we do. They sleep in their clothes, sometimes adding more layers, because taking off your clothes in a near-freezing room isn't comfortable or practical. They burrow under piles of quilts and blankets, creating little caves of relative warmth. The kids share beds, 2 to a bed, because shared body heat is the difference between sleeping and shivering all night. Thomas banks the fire for the night. This is a skill, by the way. You can't just let the fire burn hot all night because you'll run out of wood. But you can't let it die completely because starting a fire from scratch in the morning is time-consuming and wastes resources. So you arrange the logs just so, dampen it down, and hope it stays alive until morning. If you mess it up, everyone wakes up freezing. The fire dies, and it might take an hour to get enough heat going again to make the room livable. The last candle gets blown out around 10:30, and now the darkness is total, complete, absolute, the kind of darkness where you literally cannot see your hand in front of your face, where the darkness has texture and weight, where you understand in your bones why humans have always feared the dark. The only light is the dim red glow from the banked fire. It's not enough to see by, it's barely enough to locate the fireplace, but it's something, a tiny beacon that says humans are here, civilization is here, we're holding on. Margaret lies awake for a while, listening to her family breathe. Thomas is already snoring softly. The kids are settled. The house creaks and pops as the cold makes the wood contract. Outside, maybe there's the sound of wind, maybe the bark of a distant fox, maybe nothing at all. And she thinks about Christmas morning, about the small gifts they've managed to put together. A wooden toy Thomas carved for the youngest, some hair ribbons for Emma, a new shirt for the middle boy, things that cost almost nothing but took hours of work. She thinks about the special breakfast she'll make, using supplies they've been saving for weeks, about going to church if the weather holds, about the way the kids' faces will light up with excitement over things that would seem absurdly simple to us. She doesn't think about all the things they don't have because those things don't exist yet. She doesn't miss electric lights because she's never seen them. She doesn't wish for a warm house because she doesn't know houses can be truly warm in winter. She doesn't want a TV or radio or any of the things we consider essential because they're literally inconceivable to her. But here's the thing that's going to seem completely insane to you. In some ways, in some strange ways, she's happier than a lot of us are, not because her life is easier. It's objectively brutal by our standards, but because her expectations are aligned with her reality, because she finds deep joy in things we take for granted, because the simple act of being warm, of being fed, of having her family safe around her is enough. Around midnight, something wakes Thomas. A sound. He lies there in the darkness, perfectly still, listening. The fire has burned down lower, the room is noticeably colder, and there's definitely something outside. He can hear it now, a shuffling sound, something moving near the house. His heart rate picks up because you're isolated out here. The nearest neighbor is a mile away. If something's wrong, if someone needs help or means harm, you're on your own. He slowly sits up, careful not to wake Margaret. He can't see anything. The darkness is so complete that closing his eyes versus opening them makes no difference. He stands, moving by memory and feel rather than sight, and makes his way to the window. He can't see out. The darkness outside is just as complete as the darkness inside, but he can hear better now, and he realizes what it is. A deer, just a deer moving through their yard, probably foraging for any food it can find in the deep winter. He makes his way back to bed, feeling his way along the wall, past the sleeping forms of his children. His hands are already cold from being out from under the blankets. By the time he's back in bed, his fingers are stiff. Margaret stirs, murmurs something. He pulls the blankets up and lies there. waiting for his body heat to warm his little cocoon again. And he thinks about how tomorrow is Christmas, about how he'll need to be up before dawn to get the fire going strong, about the chores that still need doing because animals don't care what day it is, about how he'll make sure his kids have a good day despite having so little to give them materially. The hours between midnight and dawn are the longest and darkest. This is when the cold really sets in, when the fire burns lowest, when the darkness feels almost malevolent. This is when, throughout human history, people died. Old folks who couldn't stay warm, sick kids whose fevers got worse in the cold, people who got up to use the chamber pot and fell in the dark, breaking bones that wouldn't heal properly. Christmas morning doesn't arrive with an alarm clock or sunlight streaming through windows. It arrives when Thomas's internal clock, honed by years of farming, tells him it's around 5:30 a.m. It's still completely dark. It'll be dark for another hour and a half, but there's work to do. He gets up and the cold hits him like a slap. The fire has burned way down. He can't see it, can only sense the vague glow. His breath fogs in the air. His feet on the floor are instantly cold, even through his socks. He makes his way to the fireplace by memory, by feel, by years of practice. He stirs the coals, finds some embers still alive, adds kindling, blows gently until flames appear. And that moment, that first flicker of light after the long darkness, is like a rebirth. The light grows, the warmth begins, the house comes back to life. By the time there's enough light to see by, Margaret is up too. They move quietly, letting the kids sleep a bit longer. This is Christmas after all. They deserve a little extra rest. Thomas gets dressed properly, puts on his heavy coat and prepares to go outside for the first time since yesterday afternoon. More than 12 hours trapped inside. We can barely go 12 minutes without checking our phones, and these people went 12 hours without even seeing the outside world. He opens the door and it's still dark, but it's a different dark now. The sky is beginning to lighten in the east. Not sunrise yet, but the promise of it. The stars are still out, brilliant and sharp in a way we never see them anymore because of light pollution. The Milky Way is a river of light across the sky. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe. He makes his way to the barn. The animals need feeding, need water. Their breath steams in the cold. They're hungry and impatient. He works by feel and by the dim light of a lantern. This is his world, has always been his world, will always be his world. Back in the house, Margaret has more candles lit now. She's not conserving today, it's Christmas. The kids are waking up, excited despite the cold. There's a suppressed energy in the house. Something special is happening. They can feel it. Emma helps her mother prepare breakfast. Something special. Eggs, precious eggs they've been saving. Some of the bacon they cured from the fall slaughter. Bread made from their best flour. This is a feast by their standards. They eat as the sun finally rises, painting the snow outside in shades of pink and gold. And then the presents, small things, simple things, but you should see these kids' faces. Pure joy, unfiltered delight. A wooden horse that took Thomas hours to carve, a doll made from scraps of cloth, a pocket knife for the oldest boy, things we'd consider almost nothing. Things that would be forgotten in minutes on a modern Christmas morning. But to them, these are treasures. They'll go to church later if the weather permits. Bundle up in their best clothes, walk 2 miles through the snow, sit in a building that's not much warmer than the outdoors, sing hymns, pray, feel part of something larger than themselves. Then walk home as the sun sets again, facing another long, dark night. But before we continue with the Petersons' Christmas Day, I need you to understand something else. Something darker, something we don't like to think about. People died at night, all the time, way more than they do now, and Christmas nights were no exception. The winter of 1878, the Morrison family living in rural Wisconsin. 5 people, parents and 3 kids. Christmas night, everything seems fine. They go to sleep with a good fire, plenty of wood, everyone bundled up and warm. But sometime in the night, something goes wrong with the chimney. Maybe it was partially blocked. Maybe there was a crack. Maybe the wind was just wrong. Carbon monoxide, silent, invisible, odorless, deadly. By morning, the whole family is dead. Just gone. They probably never even woke up, just drifted from sleep to death without ever knowing. Their neighbors find them 3 days later when they don't show up for church, still in their beds, the fire burned out, the house freezing cold, 5 lives snuffed out in the darkness. This happened, not often, but regularly enough that people knew it was a risk. Deaths by fire were even more common. You've got open flames everywhere. Candles, fireplaces, oil lamps, wooden houses, fabric everywhere, people wearing layers of highly flammable clothing. Get too close to the fire while drowsy and suddenly you're ablaze. Knock over a candle in the dark, and by the time you realize what's happened, the house is burning. December 1881, the Harvison family in Minnesota, Christmas night. The mother gets up in the dark to check on the baby. She's carrying a candle. She trips over something, a toy one of the kids left out. The candle flies from her hand and lands on a pile of fabric. By the time they realize what's happening, one wall is engulfed. They get out barely, wearing almost nothing, standing in the snow, watching their house burn to the ground, watching everything they own consumed by flames. It's below zero. The nearest neighbor is too far away to help. They're going to freeze to death standing there if they don't move. They make it to the neighbor's house. Everyone survives, but they've lost everything. All their possessions, all their food for the winter, all their livestock that were in the barn. Every single thing they own in the world is just gone. And this is December 26th, middle of winter, months before they can even begin to rebuild. The community will help them. People will donate clothes, food, a place to stay. But they're essentially starting over from zero because of one moment, one stumble in the dark, one candle. And the thing is, this wasn't negligence. This wasn't carelessness. This was just living in a world where everything you need to survive can also kill you. Fire is the only thing between you and freezing, but fire can also destroy you. Darkness keeps you safe inside, but it also makes every movement dangerous. The tools of survival are also the instruments of death. Frostbite was another constant threat, because here's the thing about houses back then. They weren't sealed like ours are. Wind came through cracks, snow drifted in through gaps. The rooms farthest from the fire, the upstairs bedrooms, could be well below freezing all night. If you slept in one of those rooms because there wasn't space downstairs, you could wake up with your ears or fingers or toes frostbitten without even realizing it until the damage was done. The Jenkins family, Christmas night, 1875. Their youngest, a 3-year-old boy, somehow gets out of bed in the night. Kids do this. They have nightmares, they need to pee, whatever, but it's absolutely dark. He gets disoriented. Instead of going to his parents, he wanders into one of the unused rooms, falls asleep on the floor. By morning, his feet are so badly frostbitten they have to amputate 3 toes. 3 toes on Christmas because a kid got confused in the dark. I'm telling you these stories not to be depressing, but because we need to understand what darkness really meant to these people. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't peaceful. It was genuinely dangerous. The night was full of very real threats. The dark could kill you in a dozen different ways. And yet they lived with it. They managed. They survived because they didn't have a choice. Let me take you deeper into what a Christmas season looked like in this era, because it wasn't just one night. It was weeks of preparation, weeks of managing darkness and cold and isolation. November starts and families begin to plan. Not plan for gifts necessarily, plan for survival. Because winter is coming and Christmas falls right in the teeth of it. You need enough firewood to last months, enough food to make it through when you can't go to town because the roads are impassable, enough candles and lamp oil to push back the dark for all those long nights. Men spend weeks chopping wood, cord after cord after cord. Your life literally depends on having enough. Run out of wood in February and you might not make it to spring. Every piece has to be chopped, split, stacked, kept dry. It's back-breaking work. Your hands blister and callous. Your back aches, but you keep going because the alternative is death. Women preserve food. Everything that can be canned gets canned. Vegetables, fruits, meat. They dry apples and pears. They salt pork. They make sure they have enough flour and sugar and basics to last. Because once the snow gets deep, you're not making trips to town. You're on your own. And they make candles. This is a huge task. You save up fat from cooking all year. Beef tallow, pig lard, whatever you can get. Then you spend days rendering it, purifying it, getting it ready. You set up your candle-making equipment. You dip wicks again and again into the hot tallow, building up layers until you have a candle. Each one takes time. Each one is precious. A family might need 100 candles to make it through winter. More if they want to be comfortable, less if they're willing to spend more time in the dark. And you have to decide how to use them. Do you like candles for regular nights, or do you save them for special occasions? How much light is worth the cost? Some families made their own lamp oil too, though this was more complicated. You needed whale oil or kerosene, which usually had to be purchased. But if you could afford it, lamps gave better light than candles. Brighter, more stable. Still dangerous, still expensive, still requiring constant attention, but better. December arrives and now you're counting. Counting your wood supply, counting your candles, counting your food stores, making sure you have enough. Hopping the winter won't be too harsh. Hopping nothing goes wrong. And Christmas is this weird bright spot in the middle of all this survival calculus. A time when you allow yourself some small luxuries. An extra candle burning, a special meal, a few pieces of candy for the kids. It's not about consumerism or presents or any of that. It's about marking time. It's about hope. It's about reminding yourself that life is more than just surviving. The Johansson family, Wisconsin, December 1877. They're Swedish immigrants, first Christmas in America. They've been here 8 months. They have a claim on some land, a small cabin they built themselves and not much else. The father, Eric, works odd jobs when he can, but there's not much work in winter. They're living off what they put by in the fall and hope it's enough. Christmas Eve, they have almost nothing. Some flour, some dried beans, a little bit of meat, 3 candles left. That's it. That's all they have to mark Christmas with. But Eric's wife Ingrid makes a decision. They're going to use 2 of those candles on Christmas Eve. They're going to have light. They're going to have celebration, even if it means less light for the rest of winter. She bakes what little flour they have into a special bread. She makes a thin soup from the beans and some herbs she dried. It's not much, but she arranges it carefully. She gets out the one nice cloth they brought from Sweden. She lights both candles, and suddenly the tiny cabin is transformed. It's still cold. It's still dark outside. They're still broke and struggling and scared about how they'll make it through winter. But in that moment, with 2 candles burning and the smell of fresh bread and her family gathered around, Ingrid feels rich. She feels blessed because they're together. They're alive. They made it this far, and that somehow is enough. They sing Christmas songs in Swedish. The kids, who are starting to forget the old country, stumble over the words, but they try. Eric tells stories about Christmas back home, about his grandmother, about traditions, about a world these kids will probably never see. And the candles burn down, precious wax turning to light and warmth and memory. Later that night, after the kids are asleep, Eric and Ingrid sit by the dying fire. They don't talk about how they're almost out of money, how the winter is only half over, how they don't know if they'll make it. Instead, Eric reaches over and takes his wife's hand, and they sit there in the near darkness, holding on to each other, holding on to hope. This is what Christmas was. This is what it really meant. Not the presents, not the decorations, not the stuff, but this, connection in the face of darkness, hope in the face of fear, light, however small, pushing back against the night. Now let me tell you about the rich folks. Because darkness was democratic in a way not much else was. It didn't matter if you were wealthy or poor. When the sun set, you were in the dark. The Ashworth family, Philadelphia, December 1879. Old money, mansion in the city, servants, the works. By the standards of the day, these people have everything. And Christmas at the Ashworth house is a big deal. Parties, guests, a massive tree decorated with real candles in the parlor, which is both spectacular and incredibly dangerous. But here's what's fascinating. Even with all their money, even with all their advantages, they're still at the mercy of darkness. They have more candles than a farm family, sure. Maybe 20 or 30 burning at once during their Christmas party. They have fancy gas lamps that are brighter and safer than oil lamps. They have servants whose entire job is managing light, trimming wicks, replacing candles, making sure nothing catches fire. But it's still dark. The mansion is still mostly in shadow. The hallways are still dim. The upper floors are still cold. The night is still long. Money can buy you more light, but it can't buy you daylight. It can't buy you electricity that doesn't exist yet. And here's something interesting. Rich people were in some ways more at risk from fire because they had more candles burning, more oil lamps, fancier decorations like that tree with real candles on it, more stuff that could burn, bigger houses with more distance to escape from. The Blackwood family, Boston, Christmas Eve 1883. Wealthy family, big party, lots of candles everywhere, oil lamps, the full spectacular display. Someone, probably a servant, places a lamp too close to some drapes. Maybe it gets knocked over. Maybe the drapes just drift too close to the flame. But suddenly the drapes are on fire. In the confusion in the dark rooms beyond the party, the fire spreads faster than anyone realizes. By the time they understand how bad it is, one whole wing of the house is engulfed. People are screaming. Guests are running. It's chaos. Everyone makes it out. The servants, trained for this, get everyone out, but the house is a total loss. Generations of family heirlooms, priceless artwork, everything just gone. The family stands in the street in their fancy party clothes, watching their home burn, and they're grateful just to be alive. Money can't protect you from fire. Money can't protect you from the fundamental dangers of living in a world lit by flame. But let's go back to regular folks, because that's most people, that's the real story. The Williams family, rural Virginia, Christmas 1874. They're sharecroppers. They don't own their land. They don't own much of anything, really. They live in a 2-room shack that leaks and drafts and barely keeps the cold out. This Christmas, they have nothing. I mean nothing. No gifts, no special food, 1 candle. But the mother, Sarah, has been planning for months. Not planning to buy anything, planning to make something. She's been saving scraps of fabric all year. Little bits from mending, torn bits from worn-out clothes, anything she could find. And in the evenings, by the light of their single candle, she's been sewing, making a quilt. A small quilt for her youngest daughter, who's been sleeping under a pile of rags because they don't have enough blankets. Christmas Eve, Sarah pulls out this quilt. It's not fancy. The pieces don't match. The stitching is uneven in places because she was working by candlelight and her eyes aren't what they used to be. But it's a quilt. It's warm. It's made with love and sacrifice and hundreds of hours of work. She gives it to her daughter, and that little girl's face lights up like Sarah just handed her the entire world. Because in a way she did. She gave her warmth. She gave her something that's hers. She gave her proof that she's loved and valued and worth sacrificing for. That night, the little girl sleeps under her new quilt, warmer than she's been in months. And Sarah sits by the fire, watching her children sleep, and feels like maybe she did something right. Maybe in this hard world, she managed to create one moment of pure joy. And isn't that what Christmas is supposed to be about? These stories, these real glimpses into a world without electricity, without easy light, without the things we take for granted, they matter. They show us something about human resilience and hope that we're in danger of forgetting. And if you're finding value in this journey back through time, if these stories are making you think differently about your own life and your own Christmases, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we've got so much more to explore together. Stories that'll make you laugh, stories that'll break your heart, stories that'll change how you see the world. And drop a comment below telling me what strikes you most about life before electricity. I read every single comment, and your thoughts help shape future videos. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. The sounds of Christmas night before electricity. Because we think about the darkness, we think about the cold, but we don't really think about the silence. In our world, silence doesn't really exist anymore. Even in the quietest moments, there's ambient noise, the hum of electronics, traffic somewhere in the distance, an airplane passing overhead, the neighbor's TV through the walls, the heating system, the refrigerator. We are surrounded by a constant blanket of sound that we've learned to tune out. But in 1870, real silence, the kind that's almost physical, the kind that makes your ears ring because they're straining so hard to hear something, anything. Christmas night in rural America, after everyone's gone to sleep, the silence is profound. Maybe you hear the crackle of the fire, but that's irregular, unpredictable. Long stretches of absolute nothing. And in that silence, every sound becomes magnified, becomes significant, becomes potentially terrifying. The house creaks, just the wood settling as temperatures drop, but you don't know that. Not really, not in the moment. Your rational mind knows it's just the house, but there's a more primitive part of your brain that says something's moving, something's out there, and you lie in the darkness, listening, your heart beating faster. Outside, maybe you hear wind. Maybe the crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of snow. Maybe the call of an owl or the bark of a fox. These sounds, which would be lost in the noise of our modern world, are crystal clear. They're events, they matter. The Anderson family, Montana, Christmas night 1882. They're lying in bed, everyone asleep except the father, Carl, and he hears something. A sound outside, not an animal sound, a metallic sound, like someone trying the door handle. His blood runs cold, because they're isolated out here, miles from anyone. If someone's trying to get into his house in the middle of the night, there's no calling the cops, no flipping on an outside light to scare them away, no security system. You're on your own. Carl has a rifle, and he quietly gets it. He moves through the absolute darkness by memory and feel, his heart pounding so hard he can hear it in his ears. He reaches the door and stands there listening. The sound comes again, definitely the door handle. Someone or something is trying to get in. He chambers around in the rifle, and the sound is shockingly loud in the silence. And whatever's outside stops, total silence now. Carl stands there for what feels like hours but is probably minutes, listening, waiting, his hands cramping from gripping the rifle so hard. Finally, he hears it, footsteps crunching in snow, moving away, whoever it was is leaving. He never finds out who or what it was, a drifter looking for shelter, someone with bad intentions, an animal, he'll never know, but for the rest of that night he doesn't sleep, just sits by the door with his rifle, protecting his family in the darkness. This was reality. This constant low-level fear that something could go wrong in the night and you'd be helpless, that the darkness could hide threats you wouldn't see until too late. People today talk about being scared of the dark like it's irrational, like it's childish. But for thousands of years of human history, fear of the dark was the most rational thing in the world, because the dark could kill you. Let me tell you about the mental toll of all this darkness, because it wasn't just physical. It messed with people's heads in ways we can barely understand now. Seasonal affective disorder, that was just life. Everyone had it. The sun set at 4:30 and didn't rise until 7. That's 14.5 hours of darkness every single day for months. You spent most of your waking hours in darkness or dim light. People got depressed. Of course they did. They got anxious. They got cabin fever from being trapped inside. Families that loved each other got on each other's nerves because you couldn't get away. There was no going to another room and closing the door and being alone. You were all together, all the time, in the same small space, sharing the same small circle of light. The Harper family, Illinois, winter of 1877. By February, they're at each other's throats. The father's drinking too much, using precious money they need for supplies. The mother's snapping at the kids for every little thing. The kids are fighting constantly. They're sick of each other, sick of being trapped, sick of the darkness and the cold and the endless sameness of every day. And then something happens. The youngest boy, who's 8, runs away, just takes off one afternoon, walks out into the snow. He doesn't get far, maybe a mile, before his older brother finds him and drags him back. And when they ask him why, he says he couldn't take it anymore. He'd rather freeze to death alone outside than spend another night in that house. An 8-year-old boy chose possible death over one more dark night with his family. Let that sink in. That's how hard it was. That's the psychological toll of living in endless darkness with no escape. But here's the thing that saves people. Community, tradition, ritual, the knowledge that everyone else is going through the same thing, that you're not alone in your struggle. Christmas was part of that, a marker, a reminder that time passes, that winter won't last forever, that there's meaning and purpose beyond just surviving day to day. It gave people something to look forward to, something to plan for, something to break up the monotony of the dark months. Churches were central to this, and I'm not talking about megachurches with light shows and sound systems. I'm talking about small wooden buildings that were barely warmer than outside, where your breath fogged and your feet went numb, but where you gathered with your neighbors and sang and prayed and felt part of something larger than yourself. Christmas service was special. People came from miles around, traveling through snow and cold and darkness because it mattered. Because for a few hours you weren't alone in your isolated farmhouse. You were part of a community. You saw faces you hadn't seen in weeks or months. You sang together. You heard the old stories. You remembered that you were human, not just a creature trying to survive. The Preston family, Iowa, Christmas morning 1875. They wake up early, get dressed in their best clothes, and start the 3-mile walk to church. It's still dark when they leave. The father carries a lantern, which helps a little but mostly just creates a small bubble of light around them while emphasizing how vast and dark everything else is. They walk through snow that's knee-deep in places. The youngest child, who's 5, rides on his father's shoulders. Everyone else trudges along. It's hard work. The cold burns their lungs. Their fingers and toes go numb despite their best efforts. And they keep going because this matters, because this is what you do. They reach the church just as dawn is breaking. Other families are arriving too, appearing out of the darkness like ghosts. Everyone's red-faced and breathing hard from the walk. Everyone's cold and tired, and everyone's smiling because they made it. They're here together. The church fills up, maybe 50 people, which is everyone within walking distance. The building isn't heated beyond a small stove that's barely making a dent in the cold. People keep their coats on. Kids huddle together for warmth, but there's light. Oil lamps around the walls, candles on the altar. More light than most of these people have seen in one place in months. And they sing, oh how they sing, their voices rising together, filling the cold air with warmth of a different kind. Joy to the world, hark the herald angels sing, O come all ye faithful, songs everyone knows by heart, songs that connect them to generations past and future, songs that for a moment make everything else bearable. The preacher gives his sermon, nothing fancy but heartfelt, about hope, about light in darkness, about God not forgetting his people even in the hardest times, and people listen like their lives depend on it, because maybe they do. Maybe this is what keeps them going, this belief that it all means something, that the suffering isn't pointless, that there's purpose and plan beyond just making it through another day. After the service, people linger. Nobody wants to leave. Nobody wants to go back out into the cold, back to their isolated homes, back to the darkness. They talk, they catch up, they share news. Mrs. Johnson had a baby. The Millers lost their barn to fire. The Andersons might not make it through the winter without help, so they're organizing a donation of supplies. This is how communities survived, not through government programs or social services, but through neighbors helping neighbors, through knowing that if you fell on hard times, people would be there, and knowing that when others fell on hard times, you'd be there for them, because everyone's one bad winter away from disaster. Everyone needs that safety net of community. Eventually, they have to leave. The sun is already starting to decline. If they don't leave now, they'll be walking home in the dark, which is dangerous. So they bundle back up, face the cold again, and head home. The walk back is quieter. Everyone's tired, but there's a contentment there, a sense of having done something important. The Preston family makes it home as the sun's setting. They're exhausted, they're cold, but they're together, and they went to church on Christmas, and somehow that makes everything else a little more bearable. Now let's talk about Christmas dinner, because this was a big deal. Maybe the biggest deal of the whole holiday season. This was when you pulled out all the stops, used your best ingredients, made the most special meal you could manage. For wealthy families, Christmas dinner could be elaborate. Multiple courses, meat dishes, fancy desserts, wine, the works. But remember, even for them, it's still being prepared over a fire or a wood stove, still requiring hours of work. still needing to be timed perfectly because you can't just turn a dial to adjust the temperature. For regular families, Christmas dinner was special because of what it represented, not because it was fancy. It was special because you chose to use your good ingredients now instead of saving them, because you spent extra time on preparation, because you all sat down together and took time to appreciate the food and each other. The Mitchell family, Kentucky, Christmas Day 1878, they're tenant farmers. They don't have much, but they've been planning this meal for weeks. They saved back one of their chickens for Christmas instead of selling it. That alone is a sacrifice because selling it would have brought in money they need. But Christmas is special. Christmas deserves a chicken. The mother, Ruth, has been up since before dawn preparing. She has to time everything carefully because she's cooking over a wood fire with a Dutch oven and a few pots. Too hot and things burn. Not hot enough and they don't cook through. It's a constant balancing act that requires skill and attention. She's making the chicken, obviously, roasted with herbs she dried from her garden. She's making cornbread from their good cornmeal, not the coarse stuff they usually use. She's making gravy from the chicken drippings. She's making stewed apples sweetened with some of their precious sugar. And she's making a pie, a real pie, from dried fruit they've been hoarding. This meal represents resources. It represents time and effort and skill. It represents sacrifice because everything she's using could have been used for regular meals or saved or sold. But she's using it now on Christmas because some things matter more than pure survival. The family gathers around their small table around 2 in the afternoon when everything's ready. And this might be the only time all year they all sit down to eat together at the same time with a tablecloth and their good dishes. Every other day, it's grab what you can when you can, eat standing up or while working, no ceremony or fuss. But today is different. The father says grace, a long grace thanking God for everything they have, asking for blessings for the coming year, acknowledging the people who aren't there anymore, the relatives who didn't make it through last winter or the winter before. And then they eat, slowly, savoring every bite, because who knows when they'll have a meal like this again. The kids are well behaved in a way they usually aren't because they understand this is special. They say please and thank you. They don't grab or fight over food. They're on their best behavior because even at their young ages, they understand that this moment matters. And the food is good, really good. Not fancy by our standards, but cooked with love and skill by someone who's been cooking over wood fires her whole life and knows exactly what she's doing. The chicken is tender, the gravy is rich, the cornbread is perfect, the apples are sweet and spiced just right, the pie is flaky and delicious. They eat until they're genuinely full, which might be the only time that happens all year. They sit around the table afterward, too stuffed to move, talking and laughing. And for this one moment, they're not worried about whether they have enough wood for the rest of the winter. They're not thinking about all the work that needs to be done tomorrow. They're just here, present, together, happy. This is the gift of Christmas in this era. Not stuff, not presents, but time, attention, presence. The gift of not worrying, not working, not struggling for just a few hours. The gift of being human instead of just surviving. As evening comes, as the darkness rolls back in, they light their Christmas candles again. Maybe they'll stay up a bit later than usual, tell more stories, sing more songs, stretch out this special day as long as they can before it has to end and regular life resumes. But here's something you need to understand about these Christmas celebrations. They're not just about the day itself, they're about the memory. They're creating something that'll sustain people through the rest of the dark winter. When things get hard in January or February, when supplies are running low and everyone's sick of the cold and the dark and each other, they'll remember Christmas. They'll remember that good meal, those songs, that feeling of warmth and togetherness, and it'll help them keep going. Memory is survival, hope is survival. The ability to believe that good times will come again because they have before is what keeps people from giving up. And Christmas provides that. It's a marker, a touchstone, a proof that life is more than just endless struggle. Now let me take you somewhere different. Let's talk about the cities. Because darkness worked differently in cities, and Christmas was a whole different experience there. In a city like New York or Boston or Philadelphia in the 1870s and 80s, you've got gas streetlights. This is a game changer. These lamps are lit every evening by lamplighters who go around with long poles, lighting each lamp individually. They're not bright by our standards, creating pools of dim yellowish light, but they're consistent and they're everywhere on main streets. This means city dwellers have something farm families don't, the ability to be out after dark with some measure of safety. Not complete safety, but some. The streets are still dangerous. The shadows between the lamps are deep and dark. Muggers and thieves operate in those shadows, but you can move around, you can go places. You're not completely trapped by darkness the way rural families are. Christmas in the city is a spectacle. Shop windows are lit up. Not brilliantly, not like today, but lit nonetheless. They've got displays, decorations, gifts for sale. People walk the streets looking at them, doing what we'd call window shopping. it's entertainment, it's something to do. It's a way to be part of the holiday without spending money you don't have. The wealthy go to parties, elaborate affairs in mansions lit by dozens or hundreds of candles and gas lamps, women in fancy dresses, men in their best suits, dancing, music, food and drink, the whole production. But even these glittering parties are still fundamentally happening in dim, flickering light. The brightest parts of the room are still dimmer than a regular room in our time. The corners are in deep shadow, the hallways are dark. You navigate partly by memory, partly by the limited light available. For working-class city families, Christmas is different than for their rural counterparts, but still special. They might live in a tenement, all together in 1 or 2 rooms. They might be crowded in with other families, sharing space, sharing resources, but they still try to celebrate. The Rosti family, New York City, Christmas 1881. They're Italian immigrants, came over 2 years ago, living in a tenement on the Lower East Side. Father works at the docks when he can get work. Mother takes in laundry. 5 kids ranging from 3 to 12, all of them living in 2 rooms. They don't have much, but they've saved a little money. Enough for a special meal. Enough for one small gift for each child. They're going to make this Christmas count because this is their first real American Christmas, and they want to feel like they belong here, like they're part of this country now. Christmas Eve, the mother, Lucia, sends the oldest boy out to get the ingredients for dinner. He walks through streets that are busier than usual, people everywhere doing last-minute shopping or just soaking up the atmosphere. The gas lamps are lit even though it's only 4 p.m. because the sun set half an hour ago. There's a quality to the light that's festive somehow, even though it's the same light as every other night. He goes to the Italian market where they can get what they need, where people speak their language, where the food reminds them of home. He buys pasta, expensive good pasta, not the cheap stuff. He buys tomatoes that were canned last summer. He buys a small piece of meat, just enough to flavor the sauce. He buys a little bread, fresh and good. He carries it all home carefully, knowing that this represents a significant portion of their money. Back home, Lucia starts cooking. In their tiny apartment with their small stove, she's making the food of her childhood, the food her mother taught her to make. The smells fill the apartment, and for a moment she's transporting. She's not in this crowded tenement in a foreign country. She's home in Italy. She's a girl again, watching her mother cook. She's surrounded by family and love and certainty about who she is and where she belongs. The family eats together, squeezed around their small table, some of the kids sitting on the floor, and the food is perfect. It tastes like home. It tastes like memory. It tastes like love. The kids eat eagerly, enjoying this special meal. The father closes his eyes and for a moment looks peaceful, content, like all his worries have faded away. After dinner, they sing Italian Christmas songs. Songs the kids are starting to forget the words to because they're becoming American. But tonight they remember. Tonight they're Italian again. They're connected to their heritage, their culture, their past. Later, after the kids are asleep, the father and mother sit together in the dim light of their single lamp. They talk quietly so they don't wake the children. They talk about whether they made the right choice coming here, whether their kids will have better lives, whether the sacrifice and hardship and loneliness are worth it. And they decide together that yes, it's worth it, because their kids are learning English, getting some education, having opportunities they'd never have back home. It's hard now, but it'll be better. It has to be better. That belief is what keeps them going. This is Christmas in the city, different from the country but still fundamentally about the same things. Family, hope, connection, making meaning in a hard world, creating moments of light and warmth and joy in the midst of darkness and struggle. Now, before we go further, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hit that like button, because creating these deep dives into history, these stories that bring the past to life in a way that makes you feel like you're really there, takes serious time and research. Your like tells YouTube that this content matters, that these stories are worth sharing, and it helps more people discover what life was really like before all our modern conveniences. So show some love, hit that like. And stick with me because we're about to explore something most people never think about. The sounds and smells of a Christmas night before electricity. Think about how your house smells at Christmas now. Maybe artificial pine sent from a candle. Maybe cookies baking in an electric oven. Maybe ham in a modern stove with perfect temperature control. Clean smells, pleasant smells, controlled smells. Now imagine the Peterson house on Christmas night, 1876. The smell of wood smoke is everywhere. It permeates everything. Your clothes, your hair, your skin. You can't escape it because that fire is burning constantly and the smoke doesn't all go up the chimney. Some of it lingers, filling the house with that acrid, woody smell that's both comforting and irritating at the same time. There's the smell of burning tallow from the candles. Animal fat, rendered and purified but still distinctly animal. It's not a pleasant smell to our modern noses, but to them it's just the smell of light, the smell of evening, the smell of civilization. There's the smell of bodies. People who bathe maybe once a week in winter because heating water is work and wasting it is unthinkable. People wearing the same clothes day after day because they only have a few outfits. People living in close quarters with limited ventilation. It's not that they're dirty by their standards, but by ours, we'd be overwhelmed. There's the smell of food. Whatever they cooked for Christmas dinner is lingering, meat and grease and spices, but also the smell of food that's been sitting out because there's no refrigeration. Food that needs to be eaten soon or it'll spoil. Food that's preserved with salt and smoke and drying, giving it strong, distinctive smells. There's the smell of damp wool from clothes that never quite dry in the winter. The smell of mildew from corners that don't get enough air circulation. The smell of chamber pots that need to be emptied, but won't be until morning because going outside in the dark is too risky. This is reality. This is what life actually smelled like, and people didn't really notice because this was normal. This was just how things were. You only notice smells when they're different from what you're used to. The sounds are different too. We've talked about the silence, but there are sounds. Constant small sounds that create a soundscape completely unlike anything we experience today. The fire crackles and pops. Sometimes a log shifts and falls, sending up sparks. The sound makes everyone's head turn because fire is both friend and enemy, and you have to always be aware of it. The wind outside howls or whispers depending on its mood. It finds every crack in the walls, every gap around the windows, and whistles through. This sound is so constant that people tune it out, but it's always there, always present, like the white noise of our modern world. The house creaks and groans as temperatures drop and wood contracts. Every beam, every board, every joist makes its own sound. Experienced residents know which sounds are normal and which ones mean something's wrong. A crack in the wrong place might mean a beam is failing. A certain groan might mean ice is forming somewhere it shouldn't. People make sounds too. Breathing, snoring, the rustle of fabric as someone shifts position, whispered conversations, the scrape of a chair or the clink of dishes being set down. In the silence, every sound is magnified. You hear everything your family members do. Privacy, even auditory privacy, basically doesn't exist. And from outside, if you listen carefully, you might hear things. Animals moving in the night, the crack of tree branches, the thump of snow sliding off the roof. Each sound is mysterious, potentially meaningful, possibly dangerous. Your brain tries to identify everything, categorize it, decide if it's a threat. It's exhausting. Let me take you to a specific night, a specific family, a specific experience that'll show you what I mean. The Crawford family, Vermont, Christmas night 1879, 10 p.m. Everyone's supposed to be asleep, but the middle daughter, 13-year-old Lucy, is wide awake. She's listening to the sounds of the house in the night, and her imagination is running wild. She can hear her father snoring across the room, hear her mother's steady breathing. Her little brothers are tangled together under their quilt, making those soft sighing sounds kids make when they sleep. Normal sounds, safe sounds, but she's focused on everything else. There's the fire burning low now, almost out. The dim red glow is barely enough to see by. Every time a log shifts, she tenses up. What if a spark flies out? What if something catches fire? She's been warned about this her whole life. Fire can destroy everything in minutes. She listens to make sure nothing sounds wrong, that there's no crackle of flame where there shouldn't be. There's a sound outside, a rhythmic crunching, something walking in the snow. Her heart starts beating faster. What is it? An animal? A person? Why would anyone be walking around their house at 10 o'clock at night? The sound circles the house. One side, then the front, then the other side. It's deliberately moving around the house. Something or someone is out there. Lucy wants to wake her father, but she's also afraid of looking foolish. What if it's just a deer? What if it's nothing? She lies there, frozen, listening. The sound stops. Complete silence now. Whatever it was is either gone or standing still. Which is worse, she doesn't know. She strains her ears so hard they hurt, trying to hear anything. Any clue, and there's nothing. Just wind, just the house creaking, just her own breath and her pounding heart. She lies awake for another hour, listening, before exhaustion finally pulls her under. In the morning, her father finds tracks in the snow. A deer, just a deer wandering through their yard looking for food. Nothing threatening, nothing scary. But Lucy's terror was real. Her fear was justified. Because in the darkness, you don't know. You can't know. Your imagination fills in the gaps with the worst possibilities, and sometimes those possibilities are real. This is what living in darkness does to you. It makes you vigilant, anxious, constantly on alert for threats you can't see. It's not just uncomfortable. It's psychologically taxing in ways that are hard to articulate. Let me take you to another experience, another window into this world. New Year's Eve, 1880. We're in a small town in Ohio. The whole town, maybe 300 people total, has gathered at the church for a watch night service. This is a tradition. You gather together and stay up until midnight to see the new year in, to pray together, to reflect on the year past and hope for the year to come. The church is packed, every pew is full. Kids are sitting on the floor, people are standing in back. The small stove in the corner is going full blast, but it's still cold. Everyone keeps their coats on. Their breath fogs in the air. They've got oil lamps around the walls and candles on the altar. More light than usual, making this feel special. The golden glow flickers across faces, young and old, rich and poor. Everyone's here because this matters, because marking time matters, because entering a new year together as a community matters. They sing hymns. The preacher gives a sermon about faith and perseverance and hope, about how they made it through another year, and with God's help they'll make it through the next. People nod along. A few women dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs. This year was hard. Every year is hard, but they're still here, still together, still fighting. As midnight approaches, the preacher starts a countdown. People check their pocket watches. The men who have them anyway. Not everyone owns a watch, but enough do that they can compare and agree on when it's time. The excitement builds. Kids are wide awake despite the late hour, feeding off the energy in the room. Midnight hits, the year changes. 1879 becomes 1880, and everyone erupts, cheering, hugging, shaking hands, kissing. Happy New Year, blessings on you. May God grant us all a better year than the last. Outside, a few men fire rifles into the air, the shots echoing through the cold night. It's loud and startling and celebratory. Dogs bark in response. Kids squeal with excitement. For a moment, the darkness is pushed back by noise and light and human joy. And then it's time to go home. Time to face that walk through the dark and cold back to isolated farmhouses. Time to return to regular life, but something's different. There's a renewed sense of hope, of possibility, of maybe this year will be better. Families bundle up and head out into the night. They've got lanterns, which help a little. They've got each other. They walk together, sometimes singing, sometimes quiet, making their way home through the darkness. The Morgan family walks for an hour to get back to their farm. The parents carry the youngest kids, who fell asleep despite all the excitement. The older kids trudge along, tired but happy. It's been a good night, a special night, something to remember. They reach home around 1:30 a.m. The house is freezing cold because the fire's been out for hours. The father immediately sets to work getting it going again, while everyone else huddles together for warmth. It takes 20 minutes to get enough heat going that they can start peeling off their outer layers. They fall into bed exhausted, but content. They celebrated. They were part of something. They marked the moment. And now they can face another year of darkness and cold and work because they're not alone. The community exists. Other people are struggling too. You help them, they help you, and somehow everyone makes it through. This is the social fabric that kept people alive and sane in this era. Not government programs, not social services, but neighbors and community and shared struggle creating bonds that we've largely lost in our modern world of convenience and isolation. Let me tell you about one more family, one more Christmas. This one's going to hit different because it's about loss, about what happens when the darkness wins. The Thompson family, Nebraska, winter of 1888. They've got 5 kids. They're good people, hard workers. They've been saving up for years to buy their own land, working as tenant farmers. This Christmas, they're so close. Another year, maybe 2, and they'll have enough. They can see the finish line. Christmas Eve is beautiful. Clear skies, stars like you wouldn't believe, cold but not brutal. They have their celebration, nothing fancy but full of love. The kids are excited about small gifts. The meal is special. Everyone's happy. It's a good Christmas. 2 days after Christmas, a blizzard hits. And not just any blizzard. One of those prairie monsters that drops the temperature to 40 below and brings snow so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. The wind is so strong it knocks you down. Going outside is potentially fatal. They're prepared, they've got supplies. Plenty of food, plenty of wood. They're going to be fine, just have to wait it out. Blizzards pass, always do. They hunker down and wait. But this one doesn't pass. It rages for 3 days. The snow piles up against the house. They can't even open the door because there's 4 feet of snow blocking it. They're burning through their wood supply faster than expected because it's so cold. The animals in the barn, they can't get to them, can't feed them, can't check on them, just have to hope they survive. Day 4, the storm finally breaks. The father and oldest son dig their way out. The temperature is still well below 0. The snow is up to the windows in places. It's a frozen hellscape. They make their way to the barn, knowing what they're probably going to find. All the animals are dead. Frozen, the chickens, the pigs, the cow that was going to calve in the spring. Everything. Their entire livestock, their income, their security, just gone. thousands of dollars of value in today's money, frozen to death while they sat helpless in the house. But it gets worse, because they're not the only ones. The neighbor to the south, old Mr. Peterson, who lived alone, they find him 3 days later, frozen to death in his house. His wood supply ran out, his fire went out, and he froze to death in his own bed, just fell asleep and never woke up. Another family 2 miles north, their youngest child died, a little girl 3 years old. She got sick during the blizzard, fever, cough, probably pneumonia. They couldn't get her to a doctor, couldn't get medicine, could only watch as she got worse. She died on the 3rd night of the storm, and they couldn't even bury her because the ground was frozen solid and there was 6 feet of snow outside. They had to keep her little body in the cold pantry for 2 weeks, until the weather broke enough to take her to town. The Thompson family survives, but barely. They've lost everything they spent years building up. They have to start over from almost nothing. That dream of owning their own land, gone, set back by years, maybe forever. This is the other side of the story, the dark side, the winters that don't just bring darkness and cold, but genuine tragedy. The times when all your preparation and hard work aren't enough, when nature wins and people die. And here's the thing, this happened all the time. Every winter people died, from cold, from hunger, from disease that couldn't be treated, from accidents in the dark, from fires, from 1,000 different things that we barely have to think about now. The mortality rate in winter was significantly higher than in summer. Winter killed people. The darkness killed people. It was just a fact of life. But people didn't give up. They couldn't give up because what's the alternative? You keep going, you rebuild, you try again. You hold on to hope even when it seems foolish to do so, because hope is what makes you human. Hope is what separates surviving from just waiting to die. The Thompson family picks up the pieces. The community rallies around them. Someone donates a few chickens. Someone else gives them a piglet to raise. The church takes up a collection. It's not enough to replace what they lost, but it's something. It's proof that they're not alone, that when you fall, people will help you get back up. And the next Christmas, they celebrate again. Smaller, quieter, with the memory of that terrible winter still fresh. But they celebrate because that's what you do. You mark time. You create moments of light and warmth. You refuse to let the darkness win completely. Now let me take you somewhere completely different. Let's talk about the people who worked in the darkness, who didn't have the option of staying safely inside. The people whose jobs required them to be out there in the cold and the dark, making society function. Lamplighters in cities. These guys had one of the most important jobs in urban areas. Every evening, just as dusk was falling, they'd start their rounds. They carried long poles with a flame at the end. They'd go from lamp to lamp, lighting each one. Hundreds of lamps, miles of walking. And they did this every single evening, no matter the weather. Rain, snow, bitter cold, didn't matter. The lamps had to be lit. Then in the morning, before dawn, they'd do it all again in reverse. Going from lamp to lamp, turning them off to conserve gas. Walking through the empty pre-dawn streets, their footsteps echoing. Sometimes they were the only people out there. Sometimes they'd encounter others. Bakers starting their ovens. Milkmen making deliveries. Workers heading to factories for the early shift. The city waking up in the darkness. These lamplighters were essential. Without them, the city plunged into darkness. Crime went up, people got hurt, the social fabric frayed. But with them, with those pools of light marking the streets, civilization could continue into the evening hours. Commerce could happen. People could move around with some measure of safety. Let me tell you about Jack O'Brien, a lamplighter in Boston, Christmas Eve 1885. Jack's been doing this job for 12 years. He knows every lamp on his route, knows which ones burn clean and which ones sputter, knows where the rough neighborhoods are and where he needs to be extra careful. Tonight is Christmas Eve, and Jack would rather be home with his family. His wife Margaret, his 3 kids. They're having their celebration without him because his route needs to be done. The lamps need to be lit, that's just how it is. He'll get home around 9 p.m. after the last lamp is burning, and he'll have missed dinner and the gift giving and most of the celebration. But this is his job, this is how he feeds his family. He starts his route at 4 p.m. just as the sun is setting. He's dressed warm because it's bitter cold tonight, below freezing. Wind cutting through his coat no matter how many layers he's wearing. His fingers are already getting numb, and he's only on his 3rd lamp. As he works his way through the city, he sees Christmas through windows. Families gathered together, candles burning, Christmas trees with real candles on them, which always makes him nervous because he's seen too many house fires. He sees wealth in some neighborhoods, elaborate decorations and bright lights. He sees poverty in others, single candles and people trying to make something special out of almost nothing. He keeps moving, lamp after lamp after lamp. His routine is so ingrained he could do it in his sleep. Light the lamp, make sure it's burning properly. Move to the next one. His pole gets heavy after a while. His feet hurt, his back aches, but he keeps going. Around 7 p.m., he's in a rougher neighborhood, the kind of place where you keep your head down and move quickly. He's lighting a lamp on a side street when he hears something, a cry, someone in trouble. He turns and sees a woman being robbed. 2 men have grabbed her. She's screaming. They're trying to tear her purse away from her, and Jack has a choice to make. He could keep walking, mind his own business, not his problem, or he could help. He chooses to help because that's who he is. He runs toward them, shouting, waving his pole. The robbers see him coming and run off into the darkness. The woman is shaken but unhurt. She thanks him profusely, asks if there's anything she can do to repay him. He says no, just get home safe, it's Christmas Eve. She hurries off and Jack continues his route. He doesn't think of himself as a hero, he just did what needed doing. Same as he does every night. Same as he'll do every night for the rest of his working life. Just a guy doing his job in the darkness, making the city a little bit safer, a little bit brighter. He finishes his route around 8:30, makes his way home. His family is still up waiting for him. They saved him some dinner. The kids are excited to show him what Santa brought, even though he's the one who bought the gifts. His wife kisses him, tells him she's proud of him, that he's a good man. And Jack sits down with his family, exhausted and cold and happy, because this is his life. It's hard and it's often unfair and he works when he'd rather be home. But he's got people who love him. He's got purpose. He's making a difference, even if it's just lighting lamps, and that's enough. The railroads kept running too. Trains didn't stop for Christmas. They couldn't. People needed to travel. Freight needed to be delivered. The economy depended on trains running on schedule no matter what, so railroad workers spent Christmas working. Engineers, firemen, brakemen, conductors, station agents, telegraph operators, all of them working while their families celebrated without them. Christmas night, 1882. A train is making its way through rural Iowa. Snow is falling. Not a blizzard, but steady snow that's starting to accumulate. The engineer, a guy named Walter Schmidt, has been running this route for 8 years. He knows every curve, every grade, every potential problem spot. Tonight he's bringing passengers home for Christmas. People who worked in the city and are heading back to their small towns and farms. People who are tired and excited and anxious to get home. They're sitting in the passenger cars, staying warm by the stove, watching the snow fall past the windows. Walter can't see much. It's full dark now, around 8 p.m. The train's headlight illuminates maybe 50 feet ahead. Everything beyond that is just darkness and falling snow. He's going slowly, carefully, because in conditions like this, anything could be on the tracks. Fallen trees, snow drifts, animals, you never know. His fireman, a young guy named Tom, is shoveling coal into the firebox, keeping the boiler pressure up. It's hot work even in winter. The cab is warm from the fire but open to the elements. Snow blows in, wind cuts through. It's simultaneously too hot and too cold, and you're breathing smoke and coal dust and working your tail off. They're about 20 miles from the next station when Walter sees something. A flash of red ahead. A signal. Someone's waving a red lantern. The universal signal for danger. Stop immediately. Walter throws the brakes. The train starts to slow, wheels screeching on the rails. It takes a while to stop a moving train, even when you're going slow. They slide forward, everyone inside getting thrown around a bit, but they stop, just barely, because right ahead, maybe 50 feet, the tracks are washed out. A stream that's usually tiny has flooded in the thaw and freeze cycle, undermining the rail bed. If they'd hit that at speed, they would have derailed. People would have died. Standing there with his red lantern is the section foreman, a guy whose job is to maintain this stretch of track. He was doing his rounds, checking the line, even though it's Christmas night, even though he'd rather be home, because if he hadn't been doing his job, this train would have crashed. They get the passengers off the train. They're miles from anywhere, but there's no choice. Can't go forward, can't stay here. They're going to have to walk to the next station. In the dark, in the snow, on Christmas night. Walter and Tom and the other crew members lead the way. About 40 passengers follow, bundling up as best they can. Some of them are elderly, some are families with kids. None of them are dressed for a multi-mile hike through snow in the darkness, but there's no alternative, so they walk. They've got a few lanterns among them, not enough to really light the way, but enough that people can see the person ahead of them. They follow the tracks, which at least gives them a clear path. The snow keeps falling. Everyone's getting cold and wet and tired. The kids are crying. The old folks are struggling, but they keep moving because stopping means freezing. It takes them 3 hours to reach the next station. 3 hours of walking through snow in near total darkness, trusting that the people ahead of them know where they're going, hoping that nothing goes wrong. By the time they arrive, everyone's exhausted. Several people have frostbite. One old man nearly died, his heart giving him trouble from the exertion. But everyone made it, because the crew didn't panic, because they worked together, because they did their jobs even when it was hard and dangerous, and they'd rather have been anywhere else. The station agent at that stop, who was supposed to be home with his family, stayed at his post. When he sees this crowd of frozen, exhausted people appearing out of the snow, he immediately goes into action. Gets the stove going hot, makes coffee, telegraphs ahead to get help, opens up the waiting room so people can rest, does everything he can to take care of these folks. That's Christmas for railroad workers. That's what sacrifice looked like. Missing your own celebration so that other people can have theirs. Risking your life so that others can be safe. Working in conditions that would make most of us quit because someone has to do it. Let me tell you about another group of people who couldn't escape the darkness, couldn't hide from it, had to face it every night as part of their job. Night watchmen, security guards before security guards existed. In cities and towns, businesses and warehouses needed protecting at night. From thieves, from fire, from vandals. So men would be hired to patrol. To walk around in the darkness, checking doors, watching for trouble, ready to sound an alarm if something went wrong. These guys were often older men who couldn't do heavy labor anymore but needed income, or young guys who couldn't find anything else. It wasn't a prestigious job, it didn't pay well, but it was necessary, and it was lonely, and it was scary. Christmas night, 1879. A night watchman named Henry Clark is patrolling a warehouse district in Chicago. He's 62 years old. His back hurts, his feet hurt, everything hurts really. But he needs this job. His wife is sick. Medical care costs money. He can't afford to quit. He's got a lantern, which helps a little. He's got a club in case of trouble. And he's got his rounds to make, checking every building, making sure everything's locked up tight. Watching for fire, which is always a risk with all these wooden buildings packed close together. The streets are empty, everyone's home celebrating. Henry can see lights in windows, hear distant sounds of parties and singing. But he's out here in the cold and the dark, doing his job. He's been doing this for 3 years now, and he's never gotten used to the loneliness of it. Around midnight, he's checking a building when he smells smoke. Not chimney smoke, building on fire smoke. His heart starts pounding. He follows the smell to a warehouse. The door is locked, everything looks fine from outside, but that smoke smell is getting stronger. He breaks a window and climbs through, which he's not supposed to do, but if there's a fire starting, every second counts. Inside, it's pitch black. His little lantern barely makes a dent in the darkness. He follows his nose. The smell is stronger now, definitely smoke, and then he sees it. A glow, red embers in a corner. Someone left something smoldering, or a rat knocked over a lamp or something, but it's starting to catch, starting to spread. Henry runs back outside and starts ringing his bell, the alarm bell that watchmen carry. He rings it loud and steady, the sound carrying through the cold night air. He's shouting fire, fire, trying to wake people up, trying to get help. The volunteer fire department responds. Men tumbling out of their houses, running to the fire station, dragging the pumper through the streets. By the time they arrive, the fire has grown. It's through the wall now, spreading to the building next door, but it's not out of control yet. They can still stop it. They get their hoses working, start pumping water from the nearest hydrant. The water is freezing cold, and some of it turns to ice as soon as it hits the air, but most of it reaches the fire. They're fighting hard. Henry helps as much as he can, hauling hose, carrying equipment, doing whatever they need. It takes 2 hours, but they get it under control. The warehouse is damaged but not destroyed. The building next door is barely touched. It could have been so much worse. If Henry hadn't been making his rounds, if he hadn't investigated that smell, if he'd waited even 10 more minutes before sounding the alarm, the whole block could have gone up. Dozens of businesses destroyed, maybe people killed if the fire spread to residential areas. The fire chief shakes Henry's hand, tells him he saved lives tonight, saved livelihoods. Henry just nods. He's too tired to feel proud, too tired to feel anything except exhausted and cold and ready to go home. But he's got another 4 hours on his shift, so he continues his rounds, checking buildings, watching for trouble, doing his job. He gets home at 6 a.m. as the sun is rising. His wife is awake, worried about him. She heard about the fire. She hugs him tight, tells him she's proud of him, that he's a hero. Henry doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like an old man who's tired and hurts everywhere and just wants to sleep. But he hugs his wife back, takes off his cold, wet, smoke-stained clothes, and falls into bed. This is what Christmas looked like for working people. For the people who kept society functioning while everyone else celebrated. They didn't get special treatment. They didn't get time off. They just worked, because that's what you did. Because someone had to, because your family depended on that income. And here's something that's going to mess with your head if you haven't already subscribed to this channel. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we're about to dive into some aspects of Christmas before electricity that are genuinely disturbing. Things that most history books gloss over. Things that'll make you appreciate your modern life in ways you never have before. And I promise you, the stories we tell here on Dreamless Timelines, you won't find them anywhere else. Not told like this. Not with this level of detail and immersion. So subscribe, and let's continue this journey into the darkness. Let's talk about Christmas in institutions. Orphanages, poorhouses, asylums, prisons, places where people didn't have the comfort of family or home. Places where Christmas, if it happened at all, was a pale shadow of what it should be. The St. Mary's Orphanage, Boston, Christmas 1881. 200 kids, ages ranging from infants to 15. Most of them here because their parents died, some abandoned, some taken away from parents who couldn't or wouldn't care for them. All of them living in this big, cold institutional building, sleeping in rows of beds, eating institutional food, wearing institutional clothes. The sisters who run the place try their best. They really do. They've got almost no budget. The city and the church provide some money, but it's never enough. They're always scrambling to keep everyone fed and clothed. Luxuries like Christmas presents are basically impossible. But they try. Sister Margaret has been planning for weeks. She's organized donations from local churches. A few toys, some candy, enough for each child to get something small. It's not much, but it's something. She's also arranged for a special meal. Not lavish, but better than the usual fare. Christmas morning, the children wake up in their cold dormitory. There's no heat up here. The stoves on the first floor barely warm the ground level. The second floor is freezing. The kids dress quickly, shivering, their breath fogging. They're excited though, because it's Christmas. Even here, even in this place, Christmas means something. They gather in the dining hall. There's a small tree that Sister Margaret and some of the older boys cut down and dragged in. It's decorated with paper chains the kids made, with a few candles for light. It's not fancy, but to these kids it's beautiful. It's their tree. They have a service, songs and prayers. Sister Margaret tells the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus in a stable because there was no room anywhere else. The kids relate to this. They know what it's like to not have a place, to be unwanted, to have to make do with less than what you need. Then comes the meal. Chicken, real chicken, not just broth and potatoes like usual. Bread with butter, some vegetables, and for dessert, cookies. The kids eat slowly, savoring every bite because who knows when they'll have food this good again. After the meal, Sister Margaret starts handing out the gifts. Small things, a ball for the boys, a doll made from rags for the girls, some candy for everyone. The kids are thrilled, genuinely thrilled. These orphans who have nothing, who have lost everything, are delighted with gifts that cost almost nothing. But here's the thing that'll break your heart. After all the excitement dies down, after the gifts have been played with and the candy eaten, reality sets back in. These kids are still orphans. They're still stuck in this institution. Christmas lasts one day, and then it's back to the cold, the hunger, the loneliness, the uncertainty about their futures. Some of the older kids, the ones who understand their situation, you can see it in their faces. This moment of joy is temporary. It's wonderful, but it changes nothing fundamental about their lives. They're still alone, still unwanted, still facing a future that's uncertain at best and grim at worst. Sister Margaret sees this too. She wishes she could do more, wishes she could give them homes and families and real Christmases. But she can't. All she can do is make this one day a little bit special, and hope that it gives them something to hold on to. That night, as the kids settle into their cold beds, some of them cry quietly, missing parents they'll never see again, missing homes that don't exist anymore, missing a life they had or a life they wish they had. The darkness of the dormitory hides their tears, hides their grief, and they fall asleep holding their small gifts, treasuring them because they're the only things in this world that belong just to them. This is the reality that glossy Christmas cards and nostalgic movies don't show you. The people for whom Christmas wasn't magical, for whom it was just another reminder of everything they'd lost or never had. The darkness wasn't just physical, it was emotional, psychological, existential. In the poorhouses, it was even worse. These were places where people went when they had literally nothing. No money, no family, no options. You ended up in the poorhouse and you worked for your keep, if you could work. If you couldn't, you just existed there, waiting to die. Christmas in the poorhouse was barely acknowledged. Maybe a slightly better meal, maybe a brief service, but nothing that really made the day different from any other day, because these people were the ones society had given up on, the failures, the unfortunates, the people who fell through the cracks. The poorhouse in Philadelphia, Christmas 1877, about 100 people living there, old people who couldn't work anymore, sick people with no family to care for them, mentally ill people who had nowhere else to go, people who'd simply run out of luck and options. They live in dormitories, men on one side, women on the other, no privacy, no dignity, barely enough food to keep them alive. The cold is constant because there's never enough coal for the stoves. People die regularly, especially in winter. When you die in the poorhouse, you get buried in an unmarked grave in the potter's field. No funeral, no mourners, just another body in the ground. Christmas Day, there's no celebration. The routine continues as always. Wake up, eat a small breakfast. Work if you're able, sit and wait if you're not. Eat a small lunch, more work or more waiting. Eat a small dinner, go to bed. The only difference is the dinner is slightly bigger. There's some meat in the stew instead of just vegetables and broth. That's it, that's Christmas. An old man named William has been in the poorhouse for 3 years. He used to be a carpenter, had his own business, a wife, 2 daughters, but his wife died of cholera. His daughters married and moved away. He got too old to work reliably, lost his business, ran out of money, and here he is, 72 years old, waiting to die in the poorhouse. On Christmas night, he lies in his cot, listening to the other men snore and cough and moan. He thinks about Christmases past, when his daughters were little, when his wife was alive, when he had a home and a life and hope. He cries quietly, his shoulders shaking, hopping nobody notices. Because even here, even in this place, you try to hold on to some shred of dignity. He falls asleep and dreams about his old life, about Christmas mornings with his girls running downstairs, about his wife's cooking, about being warm and fed and loved. And then he wakes up and he's still in the poorhouse, and it's still dark and he's still alone. And he has to face another day of empty existence. This is the darkness we don't like to talk about, the darkness that electricity couldn't fix, the darkness of poverty and loneliness and despair. These people existed, they were real, their suffering was real, and Christmas for them was just another day of survival. In the asylums where people with mental illness were warehoused, Christmas was similarly bleak. These institutions were overcrowded, underfunded, and often brutal. People were locked up for things we wouldn't consider illnesses now. Women who had Barbies out of wedlock, people who were just eccentric or different, people who were genuinely ill but had no treatment available. The State Asylum for the Insane, somewhere in Massachusetts, Christmas 1883, 300 patients. Maybe half of them genuinely need to be there. The rest are people society didn't want to deal with. They live in wards, locked doors, barred windows, minimal supervision. The staff is overworked and underpaid. Abuse is common. Hope is non-existent. Christmas means nothing here. The patients don't get special treatment. No gifts, no better food, nothing. Most of them don't even know it's Christmas. They've lost track of time, lost track of reality. They exist in a world of their own minds, often terrifying, always isolating. There's a woman named Elizabeth. She's 35. She's been here for 10 years. Her family put her here because she wouldn't marry the man they chose for her, because she spoke up when she wasn't supposed to, because she was inconvenient. There's nothing actually wrong with her, but she's been locked up so long that she's started to break, to retreat into herself, to give up. On Christmas night, she sits by a barred window looking out at the darkness. She can see a few lights in the distance. Houses where people are celebrating, families together, warmth and love and joy, everything she used to have, everything she's lost, everything she'll never have again. She wonders if her family thinks about her, if they feel guilty, if they even remember her. Probably not. She's been gone so long she's probably forgotten, erased, as if she never existed. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe forgetting is easier than remembering what was lost. She turns away from the window, goes back to her cot, lies down in the darkness, and tries to sleep, tries to escape even briefly into dreams, because dreams are the only place she's free anymore, the only place where she can be who she used to be. This is the Victorian era we romanticize. This is the world before electricity that we imagine was somehow simpler, better, more moral. But it was brutal, it was cruel. It was a world where falling on hard times could destroy you completely, where mental illness was a prison sentence, where poverty was treated as a moral failing, where the darkness wasn't just outside, it was inside too, in the hearts and minds of people who'd lost hope. I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you these stories to depress you. I'm telling them because they're true. Because we need to remember that our comfortable modern lives, with our electric lights and our easy heat and our full stomachs, are built on the suffering of people who came before. People who fought and struggled and died in the darkness so that we could have light. And if these stories are making you think, if they're changing how you see history in your own life, then leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts, share this video. Let other people discover these stories, because this is what Dreamless Timelines is all about. Bringing history to life in a way that makes you feel it, not just know it intellectually. Making the past real and visceral and immediate. So share it, let's spread this knowledge together. Now let me take you back to the Petersons. Remember them from the beginning, the farm family in upstate New York. Let's see how their Christmas night ends. It's around 11 p.m. now. The kids have been asleep for an hour. Thomas and Margaret are still awake, sitting by the dying fire, holding hands. They're talking quietly about the year that's passed, the challenges they faced, the small victories they achieved, the hopes they have for the coming year. Thomas is worried about money. The harvest wasn't great. They're going to have to be careful to make it through until next fall. Maybe sell off some equipment he was hoping to keep. maybe take on extra work if he can find it. He doesn't say all this to Margaret, doesn't want to worry her, but she knows. She always knows. Margaret is worried about the kids. Emma, the oldest, is at that age where she's starting to think about marriage. But there aren't many options out here. Not many young men who aren't already spoken for or who are suitable. She doesn't want Emma to settle for less than she deserves, but she also knows that options are limited. Life is hard enough without being a spinster in a world that doesn't value unmarried women. They sit in silence for a while. The fire has burned down to just embers now. The room is getting cold. Soon they'll have to bank the fire and go to bed. Face another long, dark night. Wake up to another day of work and struggle. But for this moment, they're just here, together. After 20 years of marriage, they don't need to fill every silence with words. They're comfortable with each other. They know each other's thoughts, fears, hopes. They're partners in this hard life. And that partnership is what's kept them going through all the difficulties. Thomas thinks about his father, who lived his whole life on a farm and died at 52, worn out by work. Thomas is 45. How many more years does he have? How many more winters can he survive? He doesn't dwell on these thoughts, doesn't let them paralyze him, just acknowledges them and moves on, because what else can you do? Margaret thinks about her mother, who had 8 children and buried 4 of them before they reached adulthood. Margaret has been luckier. All 4 of her kids have survived so far, but she knows that could change any day. Disease, accident, the randomness of fate. You can do everything right and still lose everything. She pushes these dark thoughts away, focuses on the present, on the warm hand in hers, on the soft breathing of her sleeping children. "Merry Christmas," Thomas says quietly. "Merry Christmas," Margaret replies. They sit for another few minutes. Then, by unspoken agreement, they stand up. Thomas banks the fire for the night, arranging the logs carefully to keep some heat going until morning. Margaret checks on the kids one more time, pulling blankets up, making sure they're warm. They climb into their own bed, piling on quilts and blankets. The room is already cold. Within an hour, it'll be below freezing in the parts of the room farthest from the fireplace. But their little nest of blankets will stay relatively warm, heated by their body heat. Thomas falls asleep quickly. He's exhausted from the day's work from staying up later than usual. Margaret lies awake a bit longer, listening to her family breathe, to the house settling, to the wind outside, and she thinks about how, despite everything, despite the hardship and the worry and the fear, she's grateful. She has her family, she has this moment, she has hope for tomorrow. She falls asleep finally, and the house settles into the deep silence of a winter night. The fire burns low, the darkness is complete, the cold seeps in. But inside that house, 5 people sleep, warm and safe, having celebrated Christmas in the only way they know how, together, in the darkness, holding on to light wherever they can find it. And that fundamentally is what Christmas was before electricity. It wasn't about the lights or the displays or the consumerism. It was about light in the literal sense, yes, but more importantly, it was about light in the metaphorical sense, about creating moments of warmth and connection in a cold, dark world, about refusing to let the darkness win. About marking time and creating hope and reminding yourself that you're human, not just a creature struggling to survive. Let me take you forward in time now. Let's see what happens when electricity finally arrives. Because the change didn't happen all at once. It took decades for electric light to spread from cities to small towns to rural areas. And the change, when it came, was absolutely revolutionary in ways we can barely comprehend. The first commercial electric lighting systems appeared in the late 1870s. Thomas Edison's incandescent bulb became practical in 1879. By the early 1880s, some cities had electric streetlights. Some wealthy people had electric lights in their homes, but this was still rare, still expensive, still very much a luxury that most people couldn't imagine having. The Peterson family, now living in 1895, has heard about electric lights. They read about them in newspapers. They've heard stories from people who visited the city, but they've never seen one. Never experienced artificial light that bright, that steady, that doesn't flicker or smoke or need constant tending. Their world is still lit by candles and oil lamps. Their nights are still dark. Their winters are still cold and dangerous. The rhythms of their life are still dictated by the sun. Because electricity, this miracle technology, hasn't reached them yet, won't reach them for another 20 years. But in the cities, everything is changing. New York has electric streetlights now. Some theaters have electric lighting. Some stores stay open later because they can actually see to do business. The night is being pushed back. The tyranny of darkness is ending, at least for some people. Let me tell you about the first time someone sees an electric light, really sees one, understands what it means. Sarah Mitchell, 1892. She's lived her whole life in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. Candles and oil lamps, darkness after sunset. The same way people have lived for thousands of years. But she's 22 now. and she's been hired as a maid by a wealthy family in Philadelphia. She takes the train to the city, which is itself an amazing experience. She's never been on a train before, never been more than 20 miles from home. Everything is overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the buildings that are taller than anything she's ever seen. But nothing prepares her for her first night in the city. She arrives at the house where she'll be working just as the sun is setting. She's nervous, tired from the journey, worried about whether she'll be able to do the job, whether the family will like her, whether she made a mistake leaving home. The housekeeper shows her to her room, a small room in the attic, but it's hers. She starts unpacking her few belongings. The sun sets, it's getting dark. She's looking around for where the candles are, where the matches are kept. She needs light to finish unpacking. And then the housekeeper does something Sarah doesn't understand. She walks over to the wall and flips a small lever, and suddenly the room is flooded with light. Bright, steady, magical light that doesn't flicker, doesn't smoke, doesn't require constant attention. Just light, pure, artificial, miraculous light. Sarah actually gasps out loud. She's never seen anything like this, never imagined anything like this. She walks over to the light fixture, stares at it, reaches out like she wants to touch it but is afraid to. The housekeeper laughs, not unkindly. You've never seen an electric light before. Sarah shakes her head, unable to speak. She's overwhelmed because this changes everything. Everything. If you can have light like this, light that turns on instantly, that's brighter than 10 candles, that doesn't require matches or oil or wicks or constant tending, then the night isn't a barrier anymore. The darkness isn't a prison. You can do things after the sun sets. You can read, you can work, you can live. That night, Sarah barely sleeps. She keeps turning the light on and off, fascinated by how instant it is, how reliable, how bright. She reads a bit, amazed that she can see the words clearly even though it's the middle of the night. She writes a letter home, trying to describe what she's experienced, knowing that her family won't really understand because they've never seen it. In the morning, she goes downstairs to start her duties. The family has electric lights throughout the house, in every room, not just 1 or 2 dim lamps, but actual bright lights everywhere. The house is lit up like daytime even though the sun has barely risen. It's almost overwhelming how different it is from what she's used to. Over the coming weeks, Sarah adjusts to this new world of electric light. She learns to take it for granted the way the family does. She stops being amazed every time she flips a switch, but she never forgets that first moment, that revelation, that understanding that the world is changing in ways that are almost incomprehensible. She writes to her family about it, tries to explain. But how do you explain color to someone who's only ever seen in black and white? How do you explain flight to someone who's never left the ground? You can use words, but the experience, the reality, the visceral understanding of what it means, that only comes from living it. The contrast between the electrified city and the dark countryside becomes more stark as the years pass. In cities, nightlife emerges. Restaurants stay open late. Theaters show evening performances that start after dark and run late into the night. People socialize after sunset in ways that would have been impossible before. The city becomes a 24-hour place, not a location that shuts down when the sun sets. But in rural areas, life continues as it always has. Darkness still dictates the rhythm of life. The sun still determines when you work and when you rest. The night is still long and cold and dangerous. The gap between urban and rural life, which has always existed, becomes a chasm. The Peterson family, now in 1900, reads about electric lights in their newspaper, about how cities are lit up like daytime, about how some factories run night shifts because they can see to work, about how life is changing in ways that seem almost magical. But to them, it's abstract, theoretical, not real in any meaningful way because they're still living in the dark. Thomas Peterson, now 60 years old, wonders if he'll live to see electric lights in his house. Probably not. The cost of running electric lines out to rural areas is enormous. The power companies are focused on cities where the density of customers makes it profitable. Rural folks, they're an afterthought, maybe someday, but probably not in his lifetime. He's okay with that. He's lived his whole life in the dark. He's adapted to it, learned to work with it. It's all he knows. But he hopes his grandchildren will have it better. Will live in a world where darkness isn't a prison, where winter nights aren't something to be endured, but just another part of life. Margaret, now 58, thinks about all the winters she survived, all the dark nights she's lived through, all the times she was cold and scared and worried her family wouldn't make it through. She's tougher than she ever thought she could be, but she's also tired, so tired. And the idea of a house that's warm and bright all the time, that doesn't require constant work to maintain, sounds like heaven. But it's not happening, not yet, so she continues on, continues doing what she's always done, making candles, tending the fire, managing the darkness, surviving. Let me take you to 1920, the Peterson farmhouse, now occupied by Thomas and Margaret's son John and his family. John is 42. He's lived on this farm his whole life. He's seen the world change. Cars exist now, though he doesn't own one. Airplanes exist. Radio exists. The world is becoming modern in ways his parents could never have imagined. But his house is still lit by oil lamps and candles. His winters are still dark and cold. He's living in many ways the same life his father and grandfather and great-grandfather lived. The same struggles, the same challenges, the same darkness. But this year something changes. The Rural Electrification Administration has been formed. The government, recognizing that rural areas are being left behind, is starting to run power lines out to farms. It's a massive undertaking. Thousands of miles of lines. Enormous cost, but it's happening. John hears that the lines will reach his area within the year. He's skeptical. He's heard promises before that didn't pan out. But this time it's real. The surveyors come through. The work crews start putting up poles. And slowly, the power lines march across the landscape, bringing electricity to places that have never had it. December 1921, 3 days before Christmas, a crew shows up at John's farm. They're here to connect the house to the grid, to bring electricity to a building that's been standing since 1865 and has never had artificial light stronger than a lamp. John watches them work. They drill holes, run wires, install a meter and a breaker box, install switches and outlets and light fixtures. It takes them all day. By evening, they're done. The crew chief shows John how to use the switches, how to change a bulb when it burns out, basic safety information. And then the crew chief says, "Want to try it?" John's wife Mary is there, their 3 kids, everyone's watching. John walks over to the switch in the main room, takes a breath, flips it. And suddenly the room is flooded with light. Bright, steady, impossible light. His wife gasps. His kids start cheering. John just stands there, staring at the bulb hanging from the ceiling, glowing like a tiny sun. He's 53 years old, and for the first time in his life, he doesn't need to light a candle or a lamp to see at night. He flips the switch off. The light dies instantly. He flips it back on. Light off, on. He can't stop doing it, can't get over how instant and easy it is. His youngest daughter, who's 8, starts running through the house, turning on every light, every room suddenly bright. The whole house lit up like daytime even though it's 7 p.m. and full dark outside. Mary starts crying. She's been living in the dark her whole life, just like every woman before her, managing candles and lamps and fire, constantly working to push back the darkness. And now, with a flip of a switch, it's just gone. The darkness is defeated, just like that. That night, they don't turn off any of the lights. They know they should conserve, that electricity costs money, but they can't bring themselves to turn them off. They sit around the kitchen table, marveling at how bright it is, how they can see everything clearly, how they can read without straining their eyes, how the shadows are gone. The kids stay up late because they can, because there's light to see by, because nighttime doesn't mean the same thing it used to. John gets out a book he's been meaning to read, but never could because reading by lamplight gave him headaches. He reads for 2 hours straight, comfortable, relaxed, amazed. Mary does some mending, intricate work she could never do at night before. She can see every stitch clearly. She doesn't have to squint or hold the fabric right up to the lamp. She just sits there and works, and it's easy. Around 11 p.m., they finally start turning lights off. They're going to bed, but it feels different now. The darkness of their bedroom isn't oppressive anymore, isn't permanent. If they need light, they can have it instantly. Just flip a switch. The power is theirs now. They control the light. The darkness doesn't control them. John lies in bed, unable to sleep because he's too excited. His mind is racing. If they can have electric light, what else will they get? Running water someday, indoor plumbing, heat that doesn't require chopping wood. The possibilities seem endless. The world is changing, and for the first time, he and his family are part of that change. 2 days later, it's Christmas Eve, their first Christmas with electric lights. Mary has been planning all day. She's going to do something special, something impossible before. Evening comes. The sun sets at 4:30 like it always does. But instead of lighting candles, instead of carefully rationing their light, Mary turns on every single light in the house. Every room, every fixture. The house blazes with light, visible from the road, a beacon in the darkness. She's decorated with more care than usual because she can actually see what she's doing. She's cooked a special meal without struggling to see in the dim light. Everything is easier, everything is better. And when the family sits down for their Christmas Eve dinner, the room is bright as day. They can see each other's faces clearly, can see the food on their plates, can see the joy and wonder in each other's eyes. John says grace, and in his prayer, he thanks God not just for the food and the family, but for the light, for this miracle of electricity that has changed their lives in ways he's still processing, for living long enough to see the darkness finally defeated. They eat, they sing Christmas songs. The kids play games that would have been impossible in candlelight. Mary reads the Christmas story from the Bible, the text crisp and clear under the electric light, not struggling to make out words in dim, flickering lamplight. And outside, the darkness presses against the windows, but it's been defeated. It's been pushed back. It can't get in anymore. That night, after the kids are in bed, John and Mary sit in their bright kitchen and talk about how different this Christmas is from every other Christmas they've ever experienced. How strange and wonderful it is to not be managing candles and lamps, to not be worried about fire, to not be rationing light like it's a precious resource that might run out. Our grandchildren won't understand, Mary says quietly, what it was like before. They'll grow up with electric lights and think it's normal. They won't know what we survived, what generations of people survived. John nods. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good that they won't have to understand, that they won't have to live through what we did. They sit in silence for a while. Then Mary says, I want to leave one light on tonight, just one, in the kitchen, so if I wake up in the night, I can see. John understands. It's not about needing the light. It's about choosing to have it, about not being at the mercy of darkness anymore, about exercising a power that humans have wanted for thousands of years, the power to say, I want light, and make it so. They go to bed, leaving the kitchen light burning. And when Mary does wake up in the middle of the night, when she gets up to use the bathroom, she can see. She doesn't have to fumble in the dark, doesn't have to light a candle, doesn't have to worry about tripping or falling or getting lost in her own house. She just walks through, the light from the kitchen spilling into the hallway enough to see by. It's a small thing, a tiny convenience. But to someone who's lived 50 years in the dark, it's everything. This is what the end of darkness looked like. Not dramatic, not instantaneous, but creeping across the country, family by family, house by house. Each connection to the grid a small revolution. Each flip of a switch a victory over thousands of years of human limitation. By 1930, most rural areas in the eastern United States have electricity. By 1940, it's nearly universal. The dark Christmas nights that generations of humans endured, that shaped culture and family life and human psychology in profound ways, they're ending. Not completely. There are still places without power, still people living in the dark, but the tide has turned. Electricity is winning, darkness is retreating. And with it, we lose something. Not the hardship, not the danger, not the fear. We're right to lose those things, but we also lose the intimacy, the forced togetherness, the necessity of family, the value of light, the understanding that civilization is fragile and precious and needs to be maintained through constant effort. Modern Christmas is nothing like Christmas before electricity. We have lights everywhere, millions of lights. Lights on houses and trees and streets and stores. We have electric heat that keeps us warm without effort. We have refrigeration so food doesn't spoil. We have entertainment devices that fill the long winter nights. We have instant communication with loved ones far away. We have everything those people in the dark would have considered miraculous. But we've also lost the understanding of what we've escaped. Most people today have never experienced real darkness, never understood what it means to be truly cold, never known what it's like to be isolated for weeks or months at a time, never had to struggle for basic survival through a harsh winter. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good that we don't have to suffer the way they did, but maybe we should also remember, should honor the people who lived through the darkness and survived, should understand that our comfortable lives are built on their suffering and sacrifice, should appreciate, truly appreciate, the miracle of flipping a switch and having light. Let me bring you back to now, to today, December 22nd, 2025. You're probably watching this video on a device that's lit by electricity, in a room that's lit by electricity, in a house that's heated by electricity or gas, with a refrigerator humming in the background and lights outside visible through your window and the constant background noise of modern civilization. You can stay up as late as you want. You can work at night if you need to. You can read or watch movies or do any number of things that would have been impossible in the dark. You have so much light that you have to buy blackout curtains to make your bedroom dark enough to sleep in. You have so much heat that you complain if the temperature drops below 70. You have so much food that obesity is a bigger health crisis than hunger. You are living in a world that would seem like heaven to someone from the 1800s, an impossible paradise of abundance and comfort and ease. And most of the time, you don't even think about it. You take it for granted, expect it, complain when it's not perfect. And that's natural, that's human. We adapt to our circumstances and start seeing them as normal, but maybe especially at Christmas. It's worth taking a moment to think about what we've escaped, about the darkness we don't have to endure, about the cold we don't have to suffer, about the fear we don't have to face every night. Maybe it's worth thinking about the Peterson family, real people who lived real lives in the dark, who celebrated Christmas with a few candles and some homemade gifts and a special meal, and thought that was enough because it was all they had, who held on to hope in the face of endless winters. who loved each other fiercely because they had to, because they were all they had, because the darkness and the cold would have destroyed them if they hadn't stood together. Maybe it's worth thinking about the workers who kept society functioning through the dark nights, the lamplighters and railroad workers and night watchmen who sacrificed their own comfort and safety so that others could celebrate, about the immigrants who built new lives in the dark, about the orphans who had almost nothing but still found joy in the smallest gifts, about the people and institutions who suffered alone while the world celebrated without them. These people existed, they were real, they had hopes and dreams and fears just like us. They loved and suffered and survived in a world that was incomprehensibly harder than ours. And they're the reason we're here, the reason we can sit in our bright, warm houses and celebrate Christmas without worrying about freezing or starving or burning down the house. We owe them something. At the very least, we owe them remembrance. We owe them the recognition that our easy lives came at a cost, that people suffered so we wouldn't have to, that the darkness that terrified generations of humans has been pushed back by human ingenuity and effort and sacrifice. And if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey into the dark, cold Christmas nights before electricity, then you understand something that most people don't. You understand that history isn't just dates and events, it's people, living real lives, struggling with real challenges, finding joy in small moments, holding on to hope when everything seems hopeless. And that's what this channel is about. That's what Dreamless Timelines is here to do, to make history real, to bring these stories to life, to help you understand not just what happened, but what it felt like to live through it, to make the past visceral and immediate and meaningful. So if you haven't already, subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you're notified when we drop new videos, because we've got so many more stories to tell. Stories about ordinary people living through extraordinary times. Stories that'll make you laugh and cry and think differently about the world. Stories that matter. And leave a comment below. Tell me what struck you most about this journey into darkness. Tell me what you're grateful for this Christmas. Tell me if this changed how you see your own life. I read every comment. Your thoughts matter. Your engagement helps this channel grow, helps these stories reach more people. Share this video with someone who loves history, with someone who takes modern conveniences for granted, with someone who needs to understand what people before us endured. Let's spread this knowledge together. Let's keep these stories alive. Because here's the thing. As we move further into the future, as we get more and more disconnected from the past, we risk forgetting. We risk taking our miracles for granted. We risk losing sight of how hard people fought to give us the lives we have now. We risk becoming ungrateful, entitled, blind to our blessings. And that would be a tragedy, because gratitude, real gratitude, deep appreciation for what we have, that's what makes life meaningful. That's what keeps us grounded. That's what reminds us that we're part of something larger than ourselves. Part of a long chain of humans struggling and surviving and building a better world for those who come after. This Christmas, when you flip a switch and light fills your room, think about the Petersons. Think about their single candle in the darkness. Think about how precious light was to them, how much effort it took to create even a little bit of illumination. And maybe say a quiet thank you to Thomas Edison and the millions of workers who built the electrical grid and everyone who fought to bring light to the darkness. When you turn up your thermostat and warm air flows through your house, think about families huddled around a single fireplace, burning through their wood supply, hoping it would last the winter. Think about people who froze to death in their own homes. Think about what real cold feels like, and be grateful for the warmth that comes so easily to us. When you look at your Christmas tree with its hundreds of electric lights, think about the trees decorated with a handful of real candles, beautiful but dangerous, a fire hazard that people accepted because it was the only option. Think about the families who had no tree at all, who marked Christmas with a special meal and maybe a small gift, and appreciate the abundance we have now. When you stay up late on Christmas Eve, watching movies or wrapping presents or just enjoying the evening, think about families who went to bed at 7 p.m. because there was nothing else to do in the darkness, who spent 14 hours in near total black just waiting for the sun to rise, who never had the choice to stay up late, and appreciate the freedom we have to control our own time. When you communicate with loved ones far away, video calling them or sending them messages instantly, think about families who were cut off for months at a time, who sent letters that took weeks to arrive, who had no way of knowing if distant relatives were even alive, and appreciate the connections we can maintain so easily now. This is what we've escaped. This is what generations of humans endured so that we could live differently, better, easier, and while we shouldn't feel guilty about having it better, while we shouldn't wish for a return to those hard times, we should remember, we should understand, we should appreciate. Because appreciation is what gives life meaning. Gratitude is what makes happiness possible. Understanding where we came from is what helps us know where we're going. and remembering the people who suffered before us is how we honor their struggle and sacrifice. The dark, cold Christmas nights before electricity are gone. They're not coming back, and that's a good thing. But the lessons they teach us, the perspective they give us, the appreciation they inspire, those should never be lost. Those should be passed down, remembered, cherished. So this Christmas, when you're surrounded by light and warmth and abundance, take a moment, just a moment, to think about the darkness, to remember the cold, to appreciate the struggle that your ancestors endured, and to be grateful, deeply grateful, for the life you have now. And maybe, just maybe, let that gratitude inspire you to create moments of light for others, to help someone who's struggling, to share your abundance with those who have less, to be the candle in someone else's darkness, because that's what Christmas is really about. Not the lights or the gifts or the decorations, but being light for each other, being warmth for each other, being hope for each other. That's what the people in the darkness understood. That's what kept them going through the long, cold nights. Not the candles or the fires or the lamps, but each other, the human connection, the love and support and sacrifice that people made for each other because they knew they couldn't survive alone. We still need that, even with all our lights and heat and technology. We still need each other, still need to care for each other, still need to be present for each other. Maybe now more than ever, when it's so easy to be physically comfortable but emotionally isolated. When we can have all the light we want but still feel alone in the darkness of our own minds. So reach out, connect, be present, be generous, be kind, be the light, because that's what Christmas is. That's what it's always been. That's what it will always be. Light in the darkness, hope in despair, love in a cold world, human connection in the face of isolation. And that's what I hope you take from this story. Not just an understanding of history, though that matters, but a deeper appreciation for what you have, a commitment to sharing your light with others, a recognition that we're all connected, all part of this long human story of struggling and surviving and slowly, gradually making the world better. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for sticking with me through 4 hours of history. Thank you for being the kind of person who wants to understand, who wants to learn, who wants to connect with the past in a meaningful way. This is Dreamless Timelines, bringing history to life one story at a time. Subscribe if you haven't, like this video, share it, comment below, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll explore more forgotten stories from the past, Maury moments that shaped our world, Maury people who deserve to be remembered. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and may your days be filled with light, your nights be filled with warmth, and your heart be filled with gratitude for all that we have, all that we've escaped, and all that we can still become. Remember the darkness, appreciate the light, and be the candle for someone else. That's the lesson, that's the gift. That's what the dark, cold Christmas nights before electricity can teach us, even now, even in our bright, warm, comfortable world. Stay curious, stay grateful, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next one.